Cyber is complicated, and with all the controls necessary to manage the associated risks, it's easy to understand why cyber programs are often seen as restrictive, or perhaps even a burden that complicates normal business processes. But what if you could elevate cyber and enable the business to make rationalized decisions based on cyber risks? What if you could leverage information sharing and cyber awareness to serve as a strategic partner to the business? How could that impact the success of your cyber programs? We've got all the answers here. Welcome to the Resilient Podcast, where we feature resilient leaders, real insights, and unfiltered stories. My name is Deb Golden, and I'm the U.S. leader of Deloitte Advisory's Cyber Risk Services practice. In today's episode of our cyber series, I'll be talking with Wendy Kanna, Global Head of Security Governance and Oversight, Information Security and Risk at Takeda Pharmaceutical Company Limited. In this episode, Wendy shares her unique experience managing cyber on a global scale and the role that information sharing is playing in cybersecurity in Japan.
If I can convert or make one person as my ambassador, and then those persons start to talk about it, it's like you're having your own cyber army in your company, right? It's like second nature to them to believe in security. It's like just breathing. It's normal for them.
She also discusses the importance of partnering with the business and her creative approach to increasing cyber awareness throughout the organization. I think you'll be inspired by Wendy's just be curious mentality and how she uses honesty to build trust within her teams. I found her experience in overcoming the challenges of being a cyber leader, especially across a global organization faced by many obstacles, including culture, absolutely fascinating. Well, let's get to it. My conversation with Wendy Kanna. Wendy, hi, how are you today?
Hey, Deb, I'm fabulous. I mean, today's weather is awesome here in Tokyo, so I'm just having a blast today.
Well, I am super excited to have you coming live from Tokyo. Obviously, I'm here on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., and being able to have a global podcast is truly, truly exciting tonight. And so before we get started, I thought it'd be great for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better and maybe a little bit about you. And the more I talk to you and the more I get to know, seems like our listeners would probably be really interested in hearing a little bit about your heritage and maybe perhaps how you went from point A to point B, literally, in terms of locations and where the journey has gotten you today.
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in the Philippines. I moved here in Japan 17 years ago, and I've been in security for, I would say, around 19 years now. And one of the things that, people might be interested is like, I'm from the Philippines, and yet my name sounds not Filipino. 2 years ago, actually, we changed our nationality from Filipino to Japanese. And this is more of, a conscious decision for my family, my husband, my son and I. It's more of like my son thinking that he's Japanese. So we had this very interesting conversation when he went to school, and one of the teachers says like, so you're Filipino? And my son's response was, and he was 3 years old by this time, right? No, I'm Japanese. So the teacher immediately told me, hey, your son is Japanese. And it's like, oh, yeah, of course. How will I actually think at that time? I have to explain nationality to a 3-year-old, right? So it's like, so we had that conversation and he was like, no, Mom, I'm not Filipino. I don't even speak the language. I'm born here. I know Japanese, like all these things. It's like, we have a problem. So it's like, and I think it started from there, and that's when it hit us that I think this is where, unlike, in the US, if you're born in the US, then you're automatic an American. But here it's like you have to actually apply. And so we went through that process of changing, which was, one of, I think, the challenging and most personally experience that we had, because we have to translate all of our documentation since birth for my husband and I. And it's painful for him because he's the one who translated everything. But one of the challenging part, Deb, there is like, I'm the only one that, the immigration officers, lawyers have to interview for my Japanese skills. And it's like everything falls on me after that. And my son, every single day, he will ask me, did you actually pass the test? Did you pass the reading, your writing? And it's like for 1 year that the document is being processed. My son is like, maybe you did not pass that, interview, or you did not pass. You can't write, you can't read. It's like, oh my God. But yes, that's why my name changed, from Wendy Agustin to now Wendy Kanna.
I love the story and I love the history and I love that it's tied to your family and purpose. So I have to admit, I'm sitting here with a huge smile on my face listening, and I'm sure our listeners are equally as intrigued. And I, candidly, I don't even know if I would find all my documentation. And I've been in the U.S., so even just finding, doctor's records and school
Oh
records and
yeah.
all that, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to do all that. So it's pretty amazing that you've been able to accomplish that, and certainly the story of your son at 3. We'll stick with family for a moment. So is there anything in your own childhood, obviously having such a dynamic background, that has led you down this path, or any early influencers that you felt made a really big impact on who you are today?
That's a very good question because, you know, I was actually walking one day and I was like thinking, how did I ever come across to be in this field, right? Because when I was thinking of like application, during the university times, I was like, I never even thought that I put, computer science in my course, right? This one is like it's kind of became an accident in a sense, that because I was like I never even programmed. I graduated computer science, and after that I never even programmed to this day. This company, my first company that I joined, maybe second I would say, they're opening a new branch, or it's like a new company in the Philippines. And then I was recruited there, and it's more on internet security systems, and I have no idea what it means, right? So, but it sounded cool, right? So it's like, okay, let's apply for this position and let's see what will happen here, right? So it's like, so I became a security consultant, learn all of this, and then the interesting thing is, because we are a startup company, but it's an Atlanta-based company, we're the ones who are actually putting the networks that I have no idea how to do, because again, I'm a computer science. I graduated like 6 months ago. So everything was new. Then I moved here to Tokyo, in a security operations center, and I started became curious. And I started like, hey, can you teach me how to do this? Hey, can you teach me how to do that? It started with that, and I think with the curiosity that you have, and you started to learn, and then it started from there. That and I guess from being a firewall engineer, that I really started in security. Now, to this managing a global team of people that I'm working with in different regions and countries.
I just love hearing the fact that you kind of didn't know what you were getting into, and the fact that you kept going into things and challenges without understanding or knowing what the future was going to hold. It means you took some pretty good risks. I mean, because you kind of put a lot into the future of the unknown, and so clearly
Yeah.
it's unbeknownst to you, it led you here. And so I
Yes.
just something for our listeners, because I know sometimes people choose not to take risks, or they don't think big, or maybe they're not even thinking about the next step at all. And the fact
Yes.
that you were able to do that, and look where it landed you in so many uncertain places. I don't mean physical places, although that certainly seems to have happened too.
Yes. Yes.
It
Exactly.
definitely is an amazing journey for how you got from here to there. And one of the themes I think I continue to hear too is, I don't know that any of us really set out with the path in mind, knowing exactly what is going to be tomorrow, knowing exactly which steps we're going to take. And so certainly hearing you just simply willing to take the risk, or not even know what the tomorrow had, is really encouraging, I think, for individuals to want to maybe take that step. And even if they don't know what
Yes.
cyber is, it's worth
Yes.
taking the challenge.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's more of, just really being curious on the environment that you're moving towards. Even when I mentor to new grads that I have, had an opportunity to mentor, it's not about really what do you have learned in school, or what do you have learned, or what do you actually have as your skill set. But if you're really open to whatever you can see in where you're moving, or in the environment that you're in, I think you'll be successful. Right. So I think it's just really that openness and that willingness, as you mentioned, Deb, to take the risk. Though we know we're not taking the risk sometimes, because I might say that I'm a very risk averse person in most of stuff. But I think, in my career, I think it's like, what else can it damage you, or what else can it it's just look at what can it bring you, right? What new learning or what skill set that you can adapt to, right? That will be beneficial to you, right? I think that's how I see it.
Yeah, and even though you sound and say you're risk adverse, I mean, certainly, again, the challenges and risks, I think the end of the day, you believed in yourself, which enabled you to, even if you were uncertain as to tomorrow, you were willing to go, hey, what is this course about? Or what is this business stuff? And what's this cyber stuff? And I do think,
Yeah.
especially in today's day and age, I mean, cyber continues to evolve at such a quick pace, even for those of us who, everything that think we know everything there is to know about cyber, it's constantly changing. And so I think the ability and desire to want to learn, and I love your slogan, I wrote it down, be curious. And the more we can be curious about technology, capability, ourselves, the path, I think you'll be open to many more experiences in life in general.
Correct. That's right.
And one thing obviously, you're live from Tokyo today, which is amazing. What do you think is the experience from a global footprint perspective? I mean, obviously, we live in a world that is impacted by so much on the global storefront, if you will. You've got a team I would suspect is probably all over the place, not just in one location. And so maybe can you give us a little bit of insight on how you help with the challenges? I'm sure there's a convergence of lots of cultures and values. So how do you help to navigate that?
So one thing that you ask is about, the team that I do have. So yes, leading a team in Tokyo, and my team is like from different cultures. I have team members in Russia, in Mexico, and here, and in the US. So you can imagine even just the time that, I have to spend with my team, plus the fact that for us to set up team meeting, that's already a challenge because you have to find a time zone or a time wherein all of the 4-5 team members can work together. The other thing is, recently in last February, we started to have the HISAC, Health Information Sharing Analysis Center, a Japan Council based. And happy to say that, with the experiences that we have, and prior to actually having an HISAC Japan Council, we already have this Japan Pharma Company quarterly meeting wherein we started to, it's similar to the HISAC, where we start to share information, share what we're doing, share their issues, etc. Right? So and we discuss that in a quarterly basis. And for me to see that in a culture wherein it's not really that open to sharing, and now for a pharma company that we always say that yes, in our medicines, in our business, we are competitors, but in cybersecurity, we're all in this together. We all know that everyone is like lacking of people or professionals to work with. So as such, this kind of community is very important for us so that we can move the needle of security in each of our companies, right? So even before that, so when I joined the company 3.5 years ago, I'm really looking forward to having this collaboration. And now 3.5 years after, we are now like 17 companies working, collaboratively together. And then HISAC was formed in February. And just recently we had our first seminar, and it was a seminar last month, and it was attended by different companies, different life science industry. And for me to be able to be part of that seminar was very encouraging. Though the one thing that I was struggling with is, what will I present, right? Because it's always like you have a 45-minute window for you to share something, but what are you going to share? So in my mind, so I work with my teams, work with what is the topic that we can share as a first seminar that will be held in Japan, right? It's co-sponsored by HISAC.
I was just going to say, it's so amazing to hear about the sharing and the fact that, you've
Yes.
basically been able to evolve the ISAC there locally. And obviously, the purpose of ISACs is to be able to share information. And the fact
Yes.
that it's embedded in a culture, to your point, that it perhaps historically, hasn't done that. So
Yes.
I have to commend you for pushing forward in this capacity, because I do think it's probably a positive impact, but also a change, right, from a cultural perspective.
Absolutely. It was, I guess, in our first meeting, it's like everyone was looking, what are we going to do here? Because it's like most of the people are like, it was an idea from, the top level of the company and say, hey, let's have this information sharing. And then it kind of evolved. We started from like a handful of companies. And then I think people heard about it. And we started like now, when we actually launch, the HISAC, my company sponsored that event for the company. So we actually brought in all of those people, and we actually have 40 individuals who joined. And even the government, they actually heard about us, and they are asking if they can join us. So it was really, empowering, because, having those 40 people and for us to present what we have been doing in our company to promote security, it is really, a good experience for them to see that, it can be done, right? Because there's always like issues. There's a lot of like support, management support, or how can we really like move the needle of security in a company as, closed sometimes, or it's like, as you mentioned, the sharing is not a culture, right?
Yeah, no, and I think sharing, especially again, as I said earlier, with the change in cyber footprint, and we think about data, constantly evolving, and cyber truly is everywhere. It's in everything we do from a global footprint perspective. It's in people, process, assets, technology. And so when you think about that and the expansion of data and cyber, the willingness, candidly, to share, and I know we see those challenges, here in the U.S. and in other countries abroad as well. I think the more that we can get open to sharing some of these challenges, the easier we'll be able to kind of bind together, if you will, to be able to try and help make a change as it relates to being able to fight against the adversary, because of the fact that we're sharing information, and because of the fact that we're kind of have a vulnerability and an openness to want to share that information. Because I know in the past, it doesn't matter if it was US based or globally, the reason
Yes.
organizations don't want to share is because they don't want people to know their environment, or perhaps they're giving up something, some crown jewels of their organization by sharing adversary or threat intelligence. And I do agree with you. The more that we can share and have that willingness to provide that information, the more we're going to be able to hopefully get a leg up on the adversary versus the other way around.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree 100%. Because again, I think the thinking of, we have to contain this, it will damage our reputation. It's actually not, because, there would be a lot of people now that can help you understand what you're going through, right? And it's like you can share it after, where the boundaries of confidentiality that you have to adhere to, but those information that can help others to prevent that issue or attack or incident, etc., is actually, especially that we're in the life sciences industry, something that could, like stop our production, our manufacturing of our medicines, can actually affect not just our company, but actually the patients that we are here for. Right. So if we just look at that, at least that fact that we are in cyber, but since we're working in life sciences, the impact that we have or the damage is it could be a person's or a patient waiting for that medicine to be delivered to him or her, right? And this is one thing, Deb, that I always even tell my team members when I was, prior to my previous role, like, how can you be motivated to work, right? So they're like having motivational issues, etc., because we're just doing firewall changes or blocking this in the proxy, or in our antivirus, etc. It's like I told them that you think about, if you, for example, you're a firewall operator, right? You open up a port in our firewall, right? Maybe that opening of the firewall, a medicine was delivered to a person in a country wherein medicine access is not possible, right? Think about it like, not just really by the work that you've been doing, but how it will affect our patients, wherein they can get a life changing medicine, wherein it can enable them going forward or to live a better life, right? So, and I think, Deb, it's like those are like even the sharing that we have. This is a cybersecurity incident. Yes, it might affect you, but if you actually share what is the lessons learned, what did you do to another company, then they shared like that, and it's the same thing, right? So it's like, yes, we're again competitors in our medicines, but in this line of work that we have, and we have very limited people or security professionals, if we can actually extend that network, it will be not better, not just again for our company, but for the patients that we serve.
Yeah, no, and always, I love to hear, obviously, as a patient, but also as obviously a consultant, when you put your constituency, which is your patients first, and obviously
Yes.
with medical devices, patient data, consumer information, you're certainly open to lots of challenges, whether that's, as you look at your infrastructure rolling out to the cloud, whether that's
Yes.
digital identity and single user authentication, whether that's the Internet of Things, you certainly have your challenges in front of you in terms of protecting your patient data. So maybe can you walk through what do you think are your top 2 or 3 priorities, given the fact that, patient data really is of such significant, and then you put on top of that of a global nature, obviously. So what are maybe your top 2 or 3 priorities that help you kind of figure out, okay, this is what we're going to look forward to. This is kind of my vision as we kind of go down this journey.
So in my new role here, my top 2 priorities really, Deb, is more on awareness, communication, and business partnering. So I run or I work in a team wherein we need to ensure, again, I mentioned earlier about the lack of professionals that we have in security. And as such, if I can convert or make one person as my ambassador, and then those persons start to talk about it, it's like you're having your own cyber army in your company, right? And in that way, if you start protecting, having an army wherein it's like second nature to them to believe in security, it's like just breathing. I think I'm successful enough that I could say that yes, now everyone is thinking it's no longer, they're not actually no longer think about it. It's like they're just it's normal for them. The other one is which is kind of similar to that as well, which is business partnering. Is like, for us to be, just for my team or the ISR, information security and risk, to be seen as not a business of or a business of no, but for a team wherein we are a partner, wherein we can be engaging. And I know it's very difficult, especially for security, right? Everyone looks at, oh, they're security people. They would say, we have to do this, blah, blah, etc., right? But if we can even just change that mindset that we can be a business partner wherein we can help you understand what risk you are having in your company, and for you to have that ability to make a rationalized decision based on the risk that we provide, and then educate you going forward on how you can mitigate that risk, I think I would say that I have been successful. So
No, I love hearing the risk landscape. I had one client once who said to me that they were managing, it was something absurd. It was like, we were managing 600,000 high risk vulnerabilities. And I was like, you are? I was like, really? I said, maybe we need to actually understand what those are. And it was true that they had all been, deemed quote unquote high. But when we actually got down to it and we looked at the actual business impact, and we actually started talking about some of the actual materiality associated with some of them. And aside from the fact that they actually hadn't upgraded one of their core systems to a latest version of Java, was causing, candidly, 200,000 or so of those risks. They started to be like, oh, so if we just were to do the upgrade, then maybe we could actually figure out how to get through them. And I said, or if the risk profile is low, perhaps you look at other mitigating controls that you might be able to put in place and really help people understand how to leverage kind of that risk lens that you were talking about, so that they can figure out where to prioritize and and how to prioritize, because I think sometimes I call it the glassy-eyed syndrome. I feel like people are like,
Yes.
cyber's everywhere. It's a good thing, and it can be something that seems unattainable or uncertain how to address them. So I love the concept of being able to do that with a risk-based lens on top of it. So glad to hear you're doing that as well. I think it certainly helps us when we start to think about how to even tackle the challenges of risk. And you mentioned something a minute ago, and I want to pull the thread on a little bit around resources. We all
Yes.
know that cyber talent is a big challenge, let alone, when we look at the demographics and the makeup of our cyber talent. What do you think are some things that we can all be doing, or how early do we need to start? I know we're heavily engaged. I personally am engaged in K through 12 programs, mentorship
Mhm.
programs, working with
Yes.
academia to try and get not only more cyber, if you will, in these programs, but obviously more women and underrepresented individuals
Yes.
into these programs. So what do you think are some key things we can do to continue to drive the interest and also the demand associated with people looking towards a career in cyber?
That's a very good question. So one of the things that I agree with you in 100% is just mentorship, right? So one of the things that, or at least that we have in a company is having this early talent development program wherein you have the ability to at least train or have a person, have a new grad rotate within your team, and that for them to understand. So it's like I am 100% supportive of that one because it's again, sometimes people think that cyber needs to be very technical for you to be in the team, right? For you to come into the team, but I believe it's not. It's like really for even for I think the hiring managers to, I'm not saying lower their expectations, but look at it in a different way that you would need people who will be who have the experience, who have that network, who have that business, engagement capability, and then they are actually very good in terms of the risk assessment. Because from there, if you have those qualities, you can start training them, putting them in the path wherein you can start training them within the team and then put them in trainings. Because all of these trainings, the skill sets, yes, it takes time, for you to be really, let's say, an incident responder, right? But if you have that skill already, the baseline skill of the risk assessment, I believe you can be really into security. And actually, there's one good case study that we're working on, Deb, in our team, wherein this person came from infrastructure. But he has this passion to be in security for quite some time now, right? So we took that in, the passion that he has, and we start to work with my team. And I think from there, looking at that case study, that he moved to our team from infrastructure and then going into security, even though he doesn't have a background in security, but we started with these qualities that I mentioned, like, this communications and awareness. Everyone, I mean, it's not everyone can communicate, but it's like everyone has that ability that we can develop to start communicating. And if that person can actually communicate what security is all about with who doesn't have security background, I think it will be impactful because he can tap to the other people, the other people in the company who doesn't have security background, so that he can understand how they think it can be ingested, right? So I think that's how I believe we can entice. The other one is really more on having this open dialogue, conversation, lunch and learns. That it's not about security. Let's have something like how can we empower women. So from there we can start discussing and putting little by little how we can change the career path, because I think some people think that if you graduated like this, you'll be like this forever. I think that's not the case. Again, it's very true for my case. I graduated as computer science. Yes, it is part of the information technology, but it's more focused when I graduate. It's really focused on programming. and yet I never programmed to this day.
Yeah, and I programmed long ago, and I got to tell you, I don't know that I ever would have thought to do any of that or what I would do with it, and the fact that you kind of evolve and continue to grow. And I love the thinking and the thought behind, all these skills are adaptable. One of the things I like to talk about within cyber is we need the diversity, not just in gender, but in thought and in thinking and how we approach problem solving. I actually have on my team individuals who are, archaeologists, because when you think about that, they put together and solve problems. I mean, it's a different subset of problem, but it's still a complex puzzle that they're putting together. And I think when you blend cyber with business, with risk, with technology, with functional requirements, you really do need to have that disparity. And sometimes you also need to have that conflicting thinking that also comes in with the different ways to approach a problem. Because I think often, obviously, if we get groupthink or if you only have technologists and you don't have program individuals, I tend to think you maybe come up with maybe not a very challenged thought process. And so I welcome and appreciate the diligence in saying, well, maybe you didn't start out with this, or maybe you did, but then you ended up on a different path. And it's kind of how you apply that logic and that thinking as you move kind of throughout your career or throughout these challenges.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, do you have any, I'm curious, are there anything you think unique, either highly valued or challenged to you, obviously being in Japan as it relates to the cyber talent? We often hear lots of countries and some of the unique challenges, as well as, pros that they have in terms of opportunities around cyber talent. Is there anything specific to Japan that you think as you continue to evolve your organization that needs to be considered?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I attended one of the seminars. This is a couple of years ago, and the question that was asked is like, why do you think there's not so many CISOs in Japan? Right? And it's like, and even in different companies, CISO is not a career, right? So, and we delved into that question, and one of the things that I think most people don't know is like, or maybe they are aware, is this lifelong employment in Japan, especially for those domestic companies, wherein you come into the company after you graduate from the university or having a master's. And then after that, you actually rotate to the company. 2 or 3 years after, you go to another role, and then the same thing. So you're in a company, for like, let's say 30 years, but you actually never mastered anything, but all of the business functions because you rotated to most of them. But because of the the CISO is a specialized, people are looking at it as a specialized role. No one is actually can have that role, because most of the people are jack of all trades, right? And even in most of the companies, security is embedded in information technology. It's not even a function. It's just one of those tasks that they have to do. It's like, okay, you're an infrastructure engineer, and you have to also protect our environment as part of the security. So I think that's kind of unique, and this is based on the discussion that we have with the 17 other companies that we collaborate with. This is always the case. Right? And there's no specialized department wherein it's only focused on security. And it all boils down to, I think the culture or the working environment that we have in Japan. So, and you will notice that if that even in other, most of the companies here don't have CISOs unless they are really global companies. There is a security department.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't realize that there weren't as many CISOs in Japan. So that's a very interesting dynamic that you're dealing with. And again, there's a huge opportunity if you look at the upside, but I'm sure it also provides equal amount of challenges for you as you think about the execution of your organization, and candidly, maybe even the perception of you in that role, not only as the role, but obviously being a female, having this role as well. So I'm curious, one last question in that vein, do you feel that being a female, and have you had challenges from that perspective? Do you feel that you're just kind of breaking down all the barriers and pushing forward, which I love to hear and see? Or is there things that you think you've had to maybe be really conscious about how you've been approaching them?
That's Again, another very good question, Deb, because I've been to global companies prior to joining my current company, Takeda, right? And when I was recruited, and he was the first CISO to join Takeda, and he was telling me that, the good thing about joining this team or the company is that everything that you're going to do, you have a hand in it. It's like you have this, personal satisfaction or motivation because you know that you're affecting something new, right? That, I used to be coming from a financial industry. So as you can imagine that, for you to have an impact, it's very difficult because it's already been done, right? So it's like here, it's like you will always have a hand on something because it's kind of new, right? Because again, the department is new, companies is in that right path of globalizing, right? So again, when I first joined, a female, a foreigner, um, joining in, not coming from the university, going up the ladder, but really having the position, and then a female, and then a foreigner. It was very tough because people are like, even though the people are not saying that they're not looking, they are really observant, right? So they look at, what have you really done to be in this position, right? So even if they don't say it, you can feel it, right? And the way some of the people interact with you, and even like, when I'm used to leaving the office early because, I come in early, you leave early, and then you have meetings at night. It's the norm of, working in a global company because you have meetings at night to meet with all of the other peoples in the other region. And for me in the beginning, it's like they're looking at you, it's like, why are you leaving? It's still like 4 o'clock. Like,
Yeah, no, again, I think you've got lots of unique scenarios given, I mean, not just diversity of the environment that you're working in, but the time zones that we talked about before, cultural barriers, perhaps, perceptions that are spoken and probably likely not spoken a lot of times. And so, again, I tip my hat to you. I mean, many kudos for you, just even being able to kind of wade through the litany of, again, I don't want to say obstacles, perhaps challenges as you think about how you're evolving in this position. And so what I'd love to do for the kind of last part of our podcast here is to get to what I think is my favorite part of the podcast. Not that this hasn't been enjoyable. It's been great learning. I've learned so much listening to you is what I call rapid fire questions. And so feel free, one sentence, one word, 3 sentences. There's no structure here, but just a way for us to be able to get some quick hit ideas from you.
Sure.
So here's the first one. Are there any particular leaders you look up to and why?
Oh, this might be cheesy, right? So I would say first is like my manager. I mean, when he joined Mike Towers, he was like, he's amazing. I mean, I'm not just saying this to get promoted or whatever, but he started to really rattle the cages and make sure that, we evolve and put security to the next level. So that's, professionally, he really is a great leader for me to look up to.
It's amazing. And you had said, earlier on that you weren't much of a risk taker. But again, I think hearing through your story, I think you're more of a risk taker than perhaps you like to admit. Okay, we'll move on to this one. I have been told by many of my colleagues that you are a deeply honest and trusting leader, and it's something that I incredibly love from a traits perspective. I believe that I lead via transparency and vulnerability as well as being an authentic self, and clearly you've been able to provide us a lot of that insight here in this podcast. How does this play out for you on a daily basis? I mean, is that, when you think of your brand and your leadership style, is that what you want to resonate with people around you?
Yes, absolutely. So this is something that I truly live by professionally and even personally. Is like if I really don't see this going through, or if there's something that I have to say, I just say it. I say it in a way that it's still respectful, but I have to say it so that people can, and it's very direct. That's how they see me. I'm really honest and direct. I think for me, that's how I would like my team to really see me, because for me, it's like that's how you can build trust. within your teams, that if you're honest and direct, that they will, even if it is, in the beginning, it might give you a step back, but um, that's how I believe you earn the trust of your team.
No, I love that, and obviously you've certainly got a reputation for those things. I mean, like I said, it made its way to me, and I think the other thing too that you've got a reputation for is getting things done. And so I really appreciate the mix of the tenacity to get things done and make sure that we're being successful in the things that you've laid out for yourself, as well as along the way the challenges that you've talked about here tonight. And so, do you think how do you think you earn that reputation? Is it just by kind of doing as you do, and hoping that your hard work pays off? Do you go out of your way to help maybe mentor and sponsor others that might be also learning in those trades? Because sometimes I find a lot of individuals may not be as open or as trusting as perhaps you are. And certainly, how do we get these traits and this awareness out to other individuals?
I think it started that I'm a really very detailed oriented person. I think that's one thing that even it's like it's a blessing and then a curse for most times, right? As you go up, you actually need to be looking at the bigger picture. You have to create strategies, etc., right? But I think it started with that. And yes, mentoring is definitely one of the passion that I have, and especially even though with all the busy schedule that we have, this is one thing that I am really very passionate about, because having someone to put your legacy to, and how to, if you can see a person be shaped into something that they thought they cannot be, and then they're blossoming into something that they never thought that they would be. I think that's one thing. And again, and the reason being, for me, really on going back to being honest, direct, and really getting things done is first, again, if you have that trust to the person and that relationship, you'll know if the person can really do it or not, right? So you can shape the way, okay, this is the things that we're going to do. You work together as a team. And then once we all agreed upon that, we have to really strive to work together to ensure that, what we have agreed upon is something that, we can do. And as such, I think that's how I drive the team to make sure that, whatever we discuss at the team, we can actually deliver, right? And this is something that, I'm really proud of with the team that I'm working with, because again, they have accepted the way I work, and I think this was, and it's they always say that one of my colleagues will always say to me that Wendy's a robot. She doesn't actually sleep, and I'm really convinced that maybe she's like programmed to do, like, she's awake from morning, night. Whenever you ping her, she's there. I told him, or it's like it's not the case. It's just that you're just passionate in what you do, and it's like the team that surrounds you motivates you, because everyone's like working in sync to where you want the security level in the company to be. So I think that's how I see it.
And I was chuckling because I too have heard very similar things about. I sent someone a message the other day, and someone responded back. It was quite early, and someone responded back. And I'm usually really cognizant about when I send messages based on people sleeping or what have you. And I sent someone a message, and they responded back, and I think it was the morning, and they responded back with "Good evening," and I said, "Are you on a different time zone?" And they responded back and simply said, "No, but I don't know when you sleep, so I'm not entirely sure where you are." And I started laughing, and I was like, people really have to understand that I do actually sleep, and I actually get quite a bit of sleep. But at the end of the day, I think what you said about being passionate, not only what you do, but having everybody kind of working in sync. And I think you're right. Everybody drives each other, and to be able to have a team that you want to, look, I want to wake up every day and work with my team. And as corny as that sounds, it is what drives me, right? Because I have ultimate respect and passion for those individuals the same way I know they do back for me in terms of ultimately, personally and professionally, what we're trying to achieve. So I totally got you on that comment. Totally. I literally was laughing over here. And so I've got one last question for you tonight. I guess it's my tonight and not your tonight, but it's my tonight. And that would be kind of how would you, I never like to say, kind of how do you define success? Because for me, success means lots of different things for lots of different people. So if you had to put yourself on a bumper sticker and define yourself in a couple of words, what would that be?
Wow, very good question. I think I would define success if I have influenced someone to to think that they could do better than what they are right now, right? And I believe I'm already successful with that. If I can just have one person be influenced, and they could go to somewhere where they thought they would not be because you have mentored them, I think I would call that a success already.
Well, I truly appreciate that, and I couldn't agree with you more. And with that, I'm going to drop the mic because I love that you have absolutely been able to influence. You've been able to influence me tonight, and I'm sure lots of listeners as well. So you certainly are being not only successful in your job, in your profession, but also obviously in your conversation with me tonight. So, Wendy, I thank you very much for spending the time with me, but also coming live from Japan. So thank you so much.
Well, Deb, thank you so much for having me here. I mean, it is an honor, and it's been a privilege to be able to share my story over here in Tokyo. And I appreciate you having this one during your nighttime over there.
What an incredible conversation with Wendy. I find it so interesting to hear the differences, but also the similarities of managing cyber across the globe. I'm so impressed with the way Wendy is breaking boundaries in Japan and across the world by setting such a great example of encouraging mentorship in the workplace. And I'd be remiss not to mention how she defines success, by influencing someone to be better than they could be otherwise. She is truly an inspiring leader, and I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to speak with her. If you like what you heard, stay tuned for more discussions with cyber leaders as we continue our cyber series, and to hear from some new hosts as we expand the podcast to also feature chief audit executives, chief risk officers, and other executives. Check out additional episodes on your favorite podcast channel and subscribe to our podcast at Deloitte.com/US Resilient. And feel free to connect with me on Twitter at Golden Hokie. That's GO1DENHOKIE. Thank you so much for listening.